Hello, my name is Bob Brown, and it's my privilege to host this show, which is based on the reality that Westborough is a great town filled with interesting people. Many of them are long-term residents who have so many memories and stories about life in Westborough in days gone past. And so your local cable station, Westborough TV, has initiated this series of programs which are designed to reflect upon life in earlier days and to possibly make suggestions about how we can improve life in this fine town for the future. Able to tell by the way we're dressed that it's not summertime anymore. This is just before Christmas, first week in December, and we're here to take another look at this great truck, which has had a tremendous transformation since the last time we were here. And to tell you more about it, I'm going to turn it over to Lenny Hutt and then to John.
Thanks, Bob. Welcome back. You're right, Bob. It's a chilling 25 degrees today, but we're going to take a chance and see if this old girl will start for you. That in and of itself is a feat because unlike your cars at home, it only has 6 volts. It has half the capacity to start that yours do, and it's a cold day. So I'm going to invite John Mulcahy to see if he can get his pride and joy here to start up for us while we talk just a little bit. Since you were here the last time, you'll notice the tires are on. The exhaust system is on and reconstructed. All of the fluids in the truck have been changed. Wow. How do you like that? By the way, the sound you're hearing right now, in World War II parlance, it's a famous sound, and it was a sound that meant a lot to a lot of GIs. When they heard this truck coming, and they knew the truck by the sound of it, their ride home was there. So it was special to a lot of men. Or it may have meant that ammunition, desperately needed munitions, were on their way. But it's well known, this sound perks veterans' ears, and you can see the smile come to their face because they know what it is just by the sound. Just a quick recap, we've got tires on it, all the fluids have been changed, and when we come on up here to the engine compartment in the dashboard with all the nomenclature, the original gauges have been restored and reworked and reinstalled. They're all working now. The charging system is working, and John Mulcahy's been diligently pressing forward as we supply parts for him, and maybe later on in this program you'll get to go back to the shop and see where we work some magic on some of these old parts. But as we get them ready, John takes the parts and then reconstructs this truck faithfully to its original condition. So John, why don't I turn it over to you and tell the folks at home what you've been doing.
Okay, this is what's been happening while you've been gone. I've taken all the ancillary equipment off the engine, the starter, the generator, the manifolds, carburetor, horn, etc. Gone through all those pieces individually, rebuilt as needed, painted, cleaned, reinstalled. We've painted the engine the proper color. It's a very, very special, hard to find paint, and we were able to locate it. So that's a little different shade, as you'll notice, than the rest of the truck. We got a brand new wiring harness for it, and that's installed. The carburetor's been overhauled. The voltage regulator has been overhauled. The exhaust system is overhauled, new muffler, reconstructed pipes. Everything has been cleaned and greased. And as you can see over here, the cowling on the bottom, this section right here has been replaced on both sides. We had a lot of rust through there. You may be able to see the rusty pieces when we get back to the shop a little bit later. And the cowling has been reinstalled, and as Letty mentioned, the gauges have been all gone through, the switches have been gone through. We have all the correct nomenclature plates back on the dashboard. And what we're doing now at the shop is getting the floor panels and the seat frames ready for reinstallation, so that once that's done, hopefully, even without fenders, hoods, and other parts, we'll be able to take it for a little test run and see how our handiwork is coming along. Hopefully everything's going to be fine. It's looking pretty good so far. And we were lucky today. It started right up. That's a good sign because sometimes they don't particularly care for the cold weather. But she's a good old girl and she's doing just fine. As a matter of fact, if we...
Do you think we could look inside the tent?
We can turn around and maybe get a picture inside the tent here, and you can see a bunch of our spare parts. All waiting to be... all waiting to be repaired a little bit more. You can see some rust on the side panel right there. So that's all going to be cut out and replaced. Anything you see in here that's red belongs to the truck. So we've got still quite a bit more to go. That'll take us all winter probably. In another week or so, we're going to put the truck away in its winter house. And we'll have the rest of the winter to work on these parts one at a time. And then hopefully when the spring comes, we'll have a big jigsaw puzzle party, put everything back together, and you folks can come back again and take a look hopefully at the finished truck, and we'll see if maybe we can take somebody for a ride. As you can see here, there's an awful lot of parts and a lot of rust and work to be done, but that's all part of the game. We love it. So we'll go back out again, and we'll probably get ready to bring you folks to the shop and let you see what we're doing up there. So come on out.
Well, welcome to the shop. You've seen the truck, and now you see where the pieces and parts get worked on and put back together. Got a couple of things we can show you today. John and I are working on the floorboard of the truck. Because this is a convertible truck, it took a bit of a beating from the snow and ice sitting in an open cab on the floor. So we've got a few pieces that we can show you today. What did I do with a few pieces? Well, let's look at this one. There were large holes through the floor of the truck. We've used epoxy, stainless steel metal, sheets of metal, and welding, a combination of all three of those things to fill in the holes with new metal. There's one part in particular I'd like to show you, if we can break away just for 1 second. This particular piece is a good example of what the weather and the elements did. This has been restored. But prior to the restoration, this was the bottom section of this piece. And it sat just like that. Hopefully you can see the holes. And we had to cut across the entire panel, make a new piece, weld it back in, then use modern body fillers to fill the small voids, sand it all off, prime it. And that's where you see it now. It's primed. And in a few hours, we'll be starting to paint some of these different pieces with their first coat of paint. Later on tonight, a crew of fellas that you met before in an earlier program will meet here, and we'll start to assemble the floorboard pieces that hold the seats and the sides to the truck. Today, when you looked at the truck earlier, it was wide open, and you may remember where we showed you this floor is going to go. So I think that gives you a little flavor of what has to happen. The floor alone, this one little piece that we're working on today, probably has somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 major pieces, and then each nut and bolt will be cleaned separately, primed, and then painted. So if we count each nut and bolt, there's probably 200 to 300 parts in this one section of the truck that will be restored, but each part will be handled individually and restored. We try to save as many of the original nuts, bolts, and washers as we can. In some cases, like the Army Jeeps that you saw in an earlier show, those bolts actually have a stamp or a marking on them. So if someone were to judge the restoration and the quality of the restoration, they would see those original markings on each nut and bolt. That's a little bit over the top, and this truck we're not going to go quite that far with. But this does give you just a little idea of what's involved. Some of the tools that we have to do this kind of work are in this shop. We have to have an air compressor. We have to have welding and cutting equipment. A truck this size is a pretty formidable undertaking because we can't even get it in our shop. So we have to work with parts and pieces and then reconstruct it outside or perhaps in its winter quarters, which you haven't seen yet. John, you got anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think you've done a pretty good job so far, Len. As the people can see, there's an awful lot of work that is involved in trying to restore these military vehicles. But it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle. You take one piece at a time, take care of it, go on to the next piece, and before you know it, you've got a few sub-assemblies, and then after that, more and more goes together, and hopefully at the end of a year or so, the completed project is done, and you're proud of it.
Yeah, and we're experimenting all the time with new things. Someone that may be known to this audience as a local welder, Walter Schmiegel, gave us a tip that we would be able to marry stainless steel and steel in the welding process. This part that I'm holding in my hand is our test piece. The shiny metal is stainless steel, and this rusted piece is a part of the old truck. We practiced with a spot welder welding stainless steel to the steel, and as Walter said, the two blended very, very nicely, which meant to us that the new pieces of steel that we're molding into the body, we can use stainless steel. So hopefully, someday our grandchildren will still be able to enjoy this truck, whether it's sitting in a museum or in a parade, and it will still be with us because the new pieces are a little bit better than the old. So that's marrying some new technology with the old body. Along with the epoxies that we're using, it really facilitates and accelerates the pace at which we can do this work. The epoxies are phenomenal, aren't they, John? We didn't have those years ago.
No, they're really great to work with now. They're awfully strong. Of course, they don't rust. They're weatherproof. You can bond pieces together with them where you don't always have to weld. And they're very, very, very nice to use nowadays.
So we're very fortunate to have a lot of new products. I don't know if your camera can pick that up, but there's just a few holes in that. That came out of a part on the truck that you saw earlier in the program. Some of these other ones did as well. But that gives you a little glimpse into the what goes on in the shop. And once again, we just thank you for being with us, and hope you enjoy it. Have a good day.
And we'll see you again very shortly.
John, I've just been looking at the nomenclature on the dashboard here, and I'm curious about this one here. It says, before driving through wire, close front brake valve. What's that all about?
Oh, okay. Well, in the war, they had a lot of barbed wire and fences that these things had to try and go through, and that used to raise heck with the bottom of the trucks and the Jeeps. So what they did was they put on the sidewall of the chassis here a brake valve where you could flip the switch. It would turn off the front brakes, so if you ran into any wire or anything that would cut the front brake hoses, you'd still have brakes in the rear of the truck. They tried to think of everything, so that's just another little nuance that they added to the truck. And of course, they had to tell the soldiers what to do, so they put the plaque up on the dashboard to let everybody know where that switch valve was. And as you can see by the instruments, everything's working. We have good oil pressure, we have temperature, it's charging, and our little power plant is a 270 cubic inch GMC engine.
How many horsepower would that be, John?
That runs approximately 105 horsepower.
And the Army Jeeps that we had on the program before, how many horsepower were they?
Those were 54 horsepower, quite low by today's standards.
So some people have riding lawnmowers with 25 horsepower, don't they?
Oh, yes, they do. That's why the top speed on these things was 60 miles an hour or less. A Jeep could maybe pull 60 if you really honked on it. This truck is rated at 45 miles an hour, top speed in overdrive, which for the day I guess was pretty good, but today you plan your trips. And a modern equivalent truck like this would be anywhere from 250 to 500 or 600 horsepower, depending on the model. But they had to do all this work with just 100 horsepower at their feet, so it took quite a talented driver to be able to harness the shifts and that horsepower to get this baby to go, especially when it was loaded. But
John, I'm looking at the wiring harness, and I noticed that all the wires break right there. Can you tell the folks what that's about?
Sure. This is a very special truck, actually. There were not an awful lot made of this particular configuration. This is what they call an airborne truck. And what would happen, as you can see by the frame over there, it's bolted together, both sides. And this truck could be unbolted in the center, drive shafts disconnected, and you'd end up with a front half and a back half. Each half could be loaded into a C-47 or a C-46 airplane and flown to the combat area, taken out, reassembled, put back together, and off they would go. And out of the, 600 or so, 50,000 trucks built, there were only about 7,000 to 8,000 that had this air transportable capability, and we were just lucky enough to get one, so it's quite a unique truck in that regard.
Bob just asked me how they held the back end of the truck. When they broke it in half, there was a special
Oh, yes, that was
feature that came
a
with this
very,
truck.
very interesting thing. The rear half of the truck would balance on the bogies, so that was fine, but the front half, of course, would fall down on the ground. So they had a special trolley which would go under the back end of the front, had a single caster wheel, and they could roll it around on that little trolley to get it up into the aircraft. And then, of course, they'd bring it out, put the two halves together, and away they would go. It had a special cargo bed, excuse me, that would also break up near the front here, so that everything came apart very, very nicely.
John, what's this big canister doing in there?
That big canister is what they call a hydrovac, and it would be today's equivalent of a power brake booster. And because this truck weighed so much when it was loaded, of course, they had to have some sort of power braking system or you'd never be able to stop the thing. And one of the advantages, I suppose, it was such a large and heavy-duty hydrovac that when the truck was empty and you were taking a little ride downtown, it took almost no effort on the brake pedal to stop this thing. If you pushed hard,
Well, when we drove it home in the middle of the night, John, I remember all you had to do is tap the brakes and it would put you right through the windshield.
Oh, yes. Very, very good braking system. Probably much better than the going system.
John, what are all these? There's a lot going on here. Now, how many speeds is this truck?
This truck is a 5-speed transmission. 5th speed is overdrive. And that's connected under here to a 2-speed transfer case where you can multiply the speeds by 5 again at a much lower ratio. So that prevents getting stuck in the mud.
How about this lever, John? What's that one do?
That lever engages the winch in the front. It has 2 speeds in forward and 1 speed in reverse.
So there's a power takeoff unit on that side of the transmission.
That's correct.
And I see there's a plate on this side for perhaps another one.
You could put another power takeoff on this side in case you had the dump truck version, which would need a whole separate power takeoff to make the hoist go up and down.
Now this accommodates 2 more levers that aren't on right now because when you get to our shop later on in the show, we're going to show you some big red pieces that we're working on that are going to go right here and make the floor. But in order to get the floor on, you can't have everything here. So there's 2 more shifters that come out of here. What are they for, John?
One shift lever is to engage the front axle so that you'll have all 10 wheels driving at the same time. And the second lever goes down to the transfer case and shifts from high range to low range depending on what you happen to need at the moment.
Now that's just like a modern Jeep today, isn't it? In and out of 4-wheel drive and low and high range.
That's correct. And they had this way back then.
Okay, so we had all kinds of levers sticking up out of the floor, and hopefully you get to visit the shop today and see the piece that's going to come all the way from here, all the way up, and allow us to put the rest of the operating controls on the truck. Is that right, John?
That's correct. Once that's installed, we'll have the seat frames in place at the same time. Then we can actually climb up inside and sit in it and take it for a little drive, even though it doesn't have the rest of the goodies on it.
I think it might be a good idea with these temperatures, John, if we took it to some winter quarters.
I think we're going to do that in about maybe 2 weeks. Put it up for the winter. Then we can, of course, work on all the sheet metal and the other things.
Well, maybe we can get Bob to dress up real warm and he'll go for a little ride in it on the way to its winter habitat.
We'll see if we can't coerce him into that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd love it.
Well, we've journeyed from a location that's familiar to you to a secret, undisclosed location. And I want to apologize to the rest of the crew for having to wear blindfolds to get here, but it's the only way we can really come here safely. Let's take a quick look at this body before we all freeze to death. One of the things that attracted our attention to the truck was the condition of this body. There's not a ding or a mark on it. We did take it off the truck, obviously, sandblasted it, primed it, and painted it. It'll get one more coat of finish paint when we put it back on the truck. One interesting characteristic of this body, if we can come on around the back, and most of you have seen this happen in World War II movies when the troops come piling out at John Wayne's command. But this tailgate is, this truck, one of the jobs that it had was to carry troops, and there will be a canvas top with wooden bows. But the handle that I'm grabbing right now is all those GIs had to get from where I'm standing up to the truck, and they made little foot pegs for them, and they'd stick a foot in there and up they'd go. I don't know if I actually know how many troops would be carried in this truck, but certainly 25, 30 would not have been a problem at all. Next summer when we put it together and you visit us again, there's large bench seats that are in the back of the truck to accommodate the troops for hours and hours and sometimes. I don't think there's anything else too exciting. We have one little piece of work that we're going to have to do on this body to fix a little dent. But other than that, this is pretty much ready to go. We need some warm weather and the rest of the truck to be finished up, and then maybe you'll get to join us when we marry the two back together. But once again, thanks for joining us and taking a peek at our project.